Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Just getting started here. My name's Jim Tolles, for those of you who are new to me. And we'll just give people time to log on and settle in. As always, I encourage people to tune into your breath, to relax, to kind of find your inner space again after a busy day or a busy morning or whatever time it is it happens to be for you. We'll be talking about integrating a spiritual awakening shortly. But for the time being, if you're new, hey, thanks for letting me know, Kyle. I got a new microphone, by the way. But if you're new, you can do what Kyle just did, which is type in the chat pod to post questions. And I usually free flow for about usually a half hour, 40 minutes, and then I get into the questions people have. You can post a question at any given time. I just may or may not answer it immediately, because as I said, I kind of get into a flow and a rhythm. So you actually can change the resolution on the video if it's looking a little bit grainy or foggy. If over on the right hand side you just hover and you can kind of select the quality that's showing up, I believe. Or you can make it, if it's buffer or lagging too much, you can slow it down to a lower quality speed. Right now I've got mine at 720. I don't know what 720p is, pixels per second. I don't know. I'm not that technical. I'm still learning all this stuff. And you can change the different speeds. So that's just something to know. So welcome to those of you who are just joining. Take a few deep breaths, settle down, give yourself space. You may want to grab a glass of water if you haven't already. Just whatever it is to make yourself comfortable, because when we're comfortable, we tend to think a lot more clearly. We tend to open up. We tend to have realizations. And one of the big things I often say is, you don't really come here for my wisdom, you come for yours. And the more you can relax into yourself and allow yourself to just be, the more open you are to that inner intuitive knowing that responds when I say something that feels true. When we're all tense and busy trying to be somebody and running around, we really can't hear ourselves. And that means we can't hear anybody else. And usually that leads us to guessing what other people are meaning and projecting onto them what we think they're saying. And it just gets really, really messy. And many of you already know this. Which is a long way around just encouraging, once again, take a few deep breaths. We'll get started soon enough. I'll have plenty of words as usual to share. Giving yourself time to relax inwards also allows you to open to the deeper energy of this connection. Energy is an amazing communicator. It says so much, and it doesn't need any kind of words or anything like that. And things get understood in deeper ways. And it's those deeper ways that I care about most. You know, if it was just all about mental ideas, we'd all have it figured out by now, right? Because you just go read a book and voila, here you are. And that includes a spiritual awakening. You just read it in the blog and be like, oh, I got it. I'm good. But that's not how it is it? So for anybody who's really new to me, maybe just stumbled across it on my Facebook page that wanted to go see what I'd be talking about, I have a blog called spiritualawakeningprocess.com. And that's where you can go and read more than 600 blog posts that I've written in the last 6 years. And of course I have this YouTube channel with over 100 videos on it. So, let's get going. Integrating your awakening. I think the big thing that I'm really going to start out with today is just appreciating that we're already disintegrated. That the ego inherently creates separation, so we can be one thing but we can't be the other thing. We can have one thing but we don't have that other thing, and it just creates all these definitions that cut us off from ourselves. Part of the reason I encourage so many of you to relax and to breathe into the present moment is there's a kind of unifying quality to just breathing, to drawing your attention away from the mind, these different beliefs and these different ideas, to just be here. There's also a certain realization of the unity that's already here when we just bring attention to ourselves and we pull our energy away from past thoughts or future thoughts or judgments or self-definitions. And we come inwards, and here we are. And that's a powerful, powerful place. We don't realize how powerful it is. We don't realize how powerful we are. So when we disintegrate ourselves in this way of defining about what we can do and what we can't do, we are taking away our power. We're taking away our ability to flow, because now we have ideas that we have to meet and achieve, which of course leads us to all sorts of ups and downs in life. Some people can achieve those ideas that are put in front of them, and others cannot. And a lot of people fall in the middle. And sometimes the people in the middle are the most stuck, because you still believe that achieving some sort of idea or goal or award or promotion or whatever it happens, beauty idea, whatever it happens to be, you still believe that it's something you want. And you've had enough success that you think that that's what you want. And so you continue to believe in this little ruse that we've created in society. If you fail enough, sometimes you really are willing to give up a lot of our ideas about yourself. And if you succeed enough, a lot of times you start to realize that that doesn't really bring you peace or happiness or joy or love. It brings you some awards, it brings you money, it brings you compliments, right? And for some people that will be enough, and that'll keep them hooked in. But all those things are transitory. They come and go very quickly. You get an award, you're happy for what, 5 minutes, 5 months, and then you're not happy anymore. You get a promotion, you're happy for how long? You have sex, you're happy for how long, right? It's very, very short term. It's another reason why moving inwards, we're moving towards the infinite, a place of infinite strength and love and really opportunity to live. And so for those of you who are just joining me, I'm really emphasizing just how disintegrated we are. We've got pieces of ourselves everywhere and different things that we're trying to control and maintain in our lives, and it's very exhausting. And it's important to really look at that in yourself and all the different ways you define yourself, as I can be this or that, right? That tends to be a very dualistic sort of thinking. And we tend to label ourselves and judge ourselves and say, well, I'm smart, therefore I can't be dumb. Or if I'm dumb, I can't be smart, right? And this is really problematic, because life doesn't work that way. Because there are some things that we're knowledgeable in, right, if we're just going to talk purely intellectually, and some things that we're not knowledgeable in. It's like video camera stuff. Like, I'm still learning about this. So technically, I'm dumb. And if I am too stuck in the idea that I need to be smart about things, then I don't step into these other places where I would be dumb. So this disintegrates me if I believe this belief. But if I get rid of it, then there's more opportunity. There is a quality of the spiritual path that when we really allow ourselves to be in it, we open ourselves to choice, our ability to choose, and our ability to see choices. In the ego self, we don't have that opportunity. We think we do, and this is what's horrible about ignorance, is we think we're making choices. We think, oh no, of course I want to have a romantic partnership. But your ego belief has already told you that you should. So if you've already got that belief hiding in the background, you have not made a choice. You're just doing what you're told. And you're disintegrated from the many different types of possibilities in relationships or in being solitary in life by this belief that I should have a relationship. And because there's inherently about 15,000 more ideas built into that one little idea of I should have a relationship. Which of course is cutting you off from opportunities with different people in different ways, because they're not going to fit all of your ideas. And good luck finding someone who does. And God help you if you find somebody who does. And every now and then somebody does find that person who meets all this criteria, and they'll often be given these terms like soulmate or twin flame or the one or so many other different things. And of course, it tends to be a very charged relationship where there's a lot of energy, and you may find out that this whole set of ideas wasn't what you really wanted. Right? So the ego really creates this tunnel vision, and the only way you can do that is by cutting yourself off from seeing other things, seeing other aspects of yourself. Another element that we have to appreciate is that we have a whole bunch of beliefs about experiences we don't want to have, and we try to cut off ourselves from those experiences. So we can continue with a relationship example, where for a lot of people, they don't want to run into their ex again or something like this, right? So they find ways to avoid that space, where they might run into that person. And so they're cutting off themselves from different parts of physical life that they can go into, because they're trying to cut themselves off from a feeling that they don't like inside themselves. And so as we go along in this conversation today, there's inherently going to be like a reckoning where you have to reconnect with that pain that you've been trying to avoid, right? That's part of integration, is you're bringing all of you back together. You're not going to be able to keep leaving that old pain, that old wound that you had with whoever this ex-lover happens to be off to the side. It's going to be involved, remerged into you, which is not what most people want. It's not what most people think of spiritual awakening as. When we think of integrating, we're thinking usually, and I will get to this point as well, that we're just going to learn how to interact from a place of love all the time. And that's great, and that's important. We'll talk about that. But there are these other elements that are just really, really important to appreciate, because it helps you understand why so much pain becomes very, very present in our process of becoming whole, or rather allowing ourselves to be whole. Another element in this is that quality that what the ego does is every day we get up and we cut ourselves off into little pieces of things we want to feel or don't want to feel, and all these different inner games. And there's a reason I talk about journaling so much, is because when we can get those games out into the light, we can engage with them. We can start to see what they're doing and how they're influencing us and how they're creating the tunnel vision. When they hide in our minds, we can't see any of that, which means we can't engage with it really. And really means they're continuing to tell us what we should and shouldn't do. And we're so used to this, we don't even think to question any of it. It's just going on in the background. Like all the processes going on in the background of our computers right now. And they're making it run and work a certain way. But of course, those are very consciously programmed processes versus our ego cells, which we just kind of layered processes gradually over time from childhood, and we didn't really understand that that's what we were doing when we were creating this persona, this idea of ourselves. So it is really, really important to appreciate these inner definitions and to see them as a disintegrative process, a way of separating parts of yourselves from other parts of yourselves rather than unifying. And just kind of jumping way ahead in the conversation, I often talk about, we'll always kind of have some sort of ego self, right? But the conscious ego understands itself like I understand my shirt. I don't have to keep wearing the shirt. The ego selves that most of you have right now, you don't realize you can take them off. Right? And that's a really important aspect to know. So then, putting on the ego self isn't a disintegrative process, it's an exploration. And the way you engage with difficulty from a conscious standpoint is just fundamentally different, because you realize that most difficulty in life is happening on the inside, in your response to something, and the way you're scared or sad or angry about something. That's what's really creating the friction with life for the most part. And as we dissolve away those separations and we allow ourselves to have anger and sadness and fear, we also get to the roots of them, so a lot of those don't show up as much for ourselves. And that just makes interacting with life so much easier. We spend a lot of time doing healing work, going towards pain because we avoid it. And anything we avoid as I said, we're cutting ourselves off from. And so we go towards pain. We go and listen to all the difficult stories, all the old energies that we didn't really process inside. Now, when I talk about processing, I'm really talking about a space where we just fully surrender to whatever wants to come up, and we let ourselves have that experience. Because usually most of that energy got stuck inside because we didn't fully let ourselves surrender. And so there's just all these different old wounds that get stuck inside, and then they get re-triggered by another situation. And so that becomes a new wound that gets layered on top of the next wound. And so this just creates more and more inner walls to being as we are. You'll notice I never say that you shouldn't be sad or scared or angry. What I'm saying is we don't wallow in it. Right? When we start to recycle it and wallow it and believe in it, that we should be sad, we should be upset about something, then we just keep it going. And so I'm always talking about how we learn to just witness the arising of the experience, breathe into it, allow us to have the experience, to be sad. And if there's a deeper energy into it that we need to acknowledge, we acknowledge it. And in that way, it's like melting another wall. And that wall melts, and we become more integrated because of it. That energy that was trapped inside, often even the very muscle tissue, it's amazing how much we hold inside. It breaks down, it lets go, and now it's flowing. Egos are like shattered ice sculptures, right? They don't flow, they're all in pieces, and a lot of people feel very broken. But they're never separate, never broken in their waterness, right? Their true nature is that water inside. And so instead of trying to fix the broken ice sculpture, we surrender, we give that up. We say, you know what, I can't fix this ego structure. It's irreparable. Instead, I'm going to melt away. I'm going to dissolve into the pure self, which is unbreakable. And the more you dissolve into that purity that's within all of you all the time, the more clear it becomes how you want to interact in the world. Right? And that's usually the question that people have, and what they usually mean when we're talking about integrating your awakening. It's like, so how do I live from the space of love? Well, the more present that question is for you, the more I can only encourage you to go towards your pain, go towards your fears, your doubts, your guilt, your shames, your sadnesses, and your rage. Go towards those things. Because in dissolving them, that energy of you is released. You open more fully to how you naturally are. And there's a natural quality of growth that moves from that makes this whole living from the awakened space a non-issue. Right? There's a quality of aliveness inside of each and every one of you that knows how to live. And it's not hard. Anytime things start getting complicated or difficult, start looking for the ego self. Now, clearly there are difficult situations in life. Like if you have cancer and you're getting chemotherapy, that's a real difficult situation, as opposed to all the internal responses we have that are always talking to us and making life seem more difficult when we're taken care of, when we're healthy, when we have food and water, right? We come back to simplicity as a part of integrating awakening. We come back to what is real, what is actually necessary. Like things like fashionable clothing, not necessary. Right? But some people have immense egos who are just constantly lost in this. Things like actually having romantic relationships, not necessary. But there can be so much energy invested in it. And when there's so much energy invested in it, you play all these games with yourself about who you think you should be. And a lot of times, that seeking relationships is a way that people hide from aloneness, from the fear of being by oneself, and all the different issues that hide back there, right? So those fears, once again, they create your perception of choice. They create your perceptions of yourself. And so you have to go towards those fears to undo those perceptions and to widen your eyesight. Some of you, if you are sincere in your work, you'll come to these places where you're just amazed by the breadth of choice in front of you. It's an interesting transitional period because a lot of times you still have a lot of the ego self that wants a clear direction. And that's what the prison cell gives you, right? It gives you very clear direction about where the bars are and where you could potentially get out. But when you're in the open field, the sky's the limit. You can go anywhere. And so there can be those times where the ego is like, well, what do I do with this? And so that can be another question that comes up when people are wondering, like, well, how do I live from the space of awakened awareness? You know, I can go anywhere, but how do I choose? In those moments, I just encourage greater patience, to go slower. Let yourself find your way. The ego tends to be very quick and wants to get to an answer, get to an endpoint, and that's usually its attempt to get you to safety. It often tries to get you to safety by making you feel unsafe now. Saying there's something wrong with whatever's going on right now, and some other moment is going to be better somehow. You just have to know how to get to that better moment, right? And this happens in the spiritual path, where plenty of people think, well, if I just get to be enlightened or fully awakened, or all sorts of great terms start popping up out of nowhere, right? But all they really mean is the ego is looking for a new kind of safety. And it thinks it's going to come in a certain spiritual way now, or rather, it's now labeling certain things as spiritual and thinks those external events will make it happy. But they won't. They can only bring contentment from time to time, if that. See, part of unifying, allowing yourself to go towards your pain, as I said, because that's the part that we're usually cut off from, as you move towards greater peace of whatever is in your life. So much urgency really is made up, and it just starts to go away. The more deeply you are integrated, or rather, the more deeply you no longer disintegrate yourself, the fewer questions really come up. As I said, things are just getting simpler in this space. So a lot of times when people are asked this question, I would just simply encourage you to turn the question around. Once it says, when a part of you says, what do I do? How do I move from the awakened space, right? How do I live a conscious life? Turn that question around and say, what are you scared of? Because if you're resting in the space and you're allowing yourself to be, you're not hurting anything. There's no threat. There's no real way to do something wrong. But the question inherently has that presumption that there's now a right or wrong way in this space. Right? So this is the ego trying to sneak along and carry its old baggage into the next thing. It's like, okay, now we're here and we're on this place, and I want a map, right, so I can know where to go, because I don't want to do it wrong, or I don't want to get hurt. Right? That could be another aspect of the right-wrong thing. For some people, it's like, I don't want to be hurt. Right? And that will really push you towards deeper inner work. You're going to have to confront some fears that have, to this point, been happily hiding out in the background. Right? We have a lot of fears that are really good at doing that. Human beings, in some respects, we've been instinctually motivated by fear, or rather certain biochemicals that we call fear that go on inside us. And I don't intend to really get into any of that because I don't know it that well. I just am gaining an appreciation in my own growth and development, just the role of those neurotransmitters and hormones, right? That over time, that stuff has been inherited from our animal lineage, and it's still operating. That when something scares us, all this cortisol is getting released inside to get us amped up to do something. And so there's a deep, deep reprogramming where we start to move towards these old processes that are simply trying to keep you alive. And the ego is projecting fears of its safety onto everything. It really responds like everything is about to eat you. I know this is a little bit of a joke, but I really encourage you to think of it that way next time you're irrationally scared of something. And maybe you're not to that point. Maybe you're still justifying your fears. And if you are doing that, then that's where your work is to say, well, why have you justified that fear? A lot of people think what they're saying is rational, but it's really not. because fear doesn't really help us that much. Most of the time it gets in the way of us thinking well and causes us to create greater problems than if we just slowed down. We took 3 deep breaths and we really looked at a given situation. So in these spaces, as you rest more deeply into this inner unity, it's going to shine more light on all those places that are still trying to hold back, that actually don't want to integrate with you, don't want to merge, or rather you don't want them to, because you still think you need them. You need to be a somebody. Because if you're nobody, then, well, something bad's going to happen. Once again, like, a lot of fear is just this really, really vague, ambiguous threat. Anytime you get to a point in your journey where you're like, I'm afraid, but I don't know why, all sorts of red alert signs should be going off in your head. So like, I need to really look at this, because if there isn't a near and present danger for me to really look at and engage with, to have any reason to justify this fear, I need to want to know what this is about and where it's coming from, because it's clearly controlling me and it's clearly irrational. And I think there's a lot of ways, as I said earlier in your path, it's important to unmask the fears that you think are rational. Like, I need to have enough money. Like, tons of people have money worries, but that worry doesn't help you. It usually gets you in more trouble. It doesn't help you to think mindfully about how to manage money better, or find a better job to pay for more, or to learn how to ask for more help from other people. It just causes perpetual fear instead. Right? And I can easily point you towards the fact that a lot of money fears are a fear of death or a fear of pain. But this conceptual understanding is not enough. You have to take the journey. You have to go inwards to say, okay, I'm going to sit with this fear of not having enough money and really breathe into it, experience it in the body, and learn how to release it. See where it's coming from. Why do you even believe in it? As many of you who have done your work know, you often break down these old fears and they just make no sense anymore to you. And you realize not only did they not help you in any way, but for the most part, they really did hurt you. Or they cut you off from opportunities, and you may never know just how much you've been cut off from really important opportunities in your life because of them. But at no time do we ever say that fear is bad. We just simply say it's part of the human experience and we embrace it. And in that embrace, it tends to dissolve it, and these things disappear. Sometimes people think there is a particular way to act spiritually in life, and there isn't. The more you're just resting in the space of awareness, how you act is going to come from a very different place. It really is coming from a place of a truly functional human being. Because when we act from fear and sadness and all that other stuff, we're dysfunctional. We're not acting from any sort of sane or rational consciousness, anything like that. We're just reacting from animal instincts and ego and a whole bunch of social programming, and all that stuff really is built out of fear, and it's just gotten so twisted. So you can act in any regard, in any way. Now, to people who are earlier on their path, you're like, well, then that means I could go kill somebody. It's like, no, that's not what that means. It means you would respond to any situation as it feels true to you. It's very rare that somebody in that space is going to want to kill somebody, but it's not prohibited. And this is a very difficult thing for people to wrap their minds around. But there are situations that people get thrown into that are violent and pretty wild and crazy. And you could think, in the middle of a civil war, even if you weren't an active participant, you could end up in a situation where your life was being threatened. And maybe that would arise. And I'm not emphasizing violence at all. I'm simply pointing to the fact that this is a deeply flexible and open place. And there are times that when we're in this deep, profound place of love, that certain threats that we would have thought violence would have solved the situation, love actually solves it, or that something dissolves in the other person. Because that space of oneness in you touches them, and that part of them starts to remember. But we don't bet on this. We don't expect this. We simply stay present in this unified inner space And that allows us to engage in the most appropriate and mindful way we can. But that's not necessarily a clean and easy way, because that's not how this world works. And the awakened space embraces that. There is so much power in us when we are unified, when we allow ourselves to be as we are. It's not a difficult thing. We make things difficult on ourselves. As I said, constantly defining ourselves, creating our ego self, trying to be somebody, trying to avoid situations, trying to get things. Those of you who have done their work, you probably have realized that there are amazing things that come into your life that you never would have guessed would have been something that you wanted in your life, and you couldn't get them, or receive them, I should say, until you let go and let life show you the door. Integrating your awakening is very much about paddling your boat and appreciating the river at the same time. That there are times for action, there's times for receptivity, and that's a dance. There are no particularly hard rules, but typically we tend to be more kind and compassionate towards people in the ways you would expect. But other times, something more difficult and harsh may come out of us because that's what's required. Rumi often talks about this in some of his writing about the slaps of a stern father, and that being necessary at certain times in the spiritual path to get people's attention, to snap people out of their apathy, their ego selves, right? But that comes from love. It's difficult for people to understand that, right? But it arises in the moment. It is the thing that feels most true to do, and you do it. But it doesn't come from a place of being mean-spirited, of trying to inflict an opinion on somebody. There's none of that delusion in it. And as I said, this is very difficult for people to believe. And that's why most religions just keep it simple. Say, just be kind. Because 95% of the time, be kind is great. That's mostly what we need people to do. Because when people are kind to each other, they tend to be kind to other people, and kindness spreads out. If people are cruel to each other, then they tend to be cruel to more people, and cruelty spreads out. It's really kind of that simple. But actually being one with the current moment's even simpler, because you don't have to remember any of these beliefs. Truth moves through you. Love moves through you. So when we talk about integrating and awakening, let's let go of any sense that there's going to be a new set of ideas to follow, a new set of ways to act or not act, right? That's the nature of the ego self, is to create these new walls and these new barriers. That's not how we function from the awakened space. We function from that space of inner intelligence, divine flow. It's not mystical. It actually can be very, very loud at times. It can be urgent, but it can be quiet. Right? It's just following that inner flow. And it may take us towards difficulty. And when difficulty comes, because we're staying unified in ourselves, we embrace the difficulty. We go towards it. We don't run from it. We don't attack it either. Right? We're not trying to defeat the situation to get to a better moment. We keep embracing the moment exactly as it is. And this is just so important to understand. People do not want to embrace the present moment as it is. Most people want the current moment to be pleasing. But we have to learn to just embrace what is. Because whatever is. It's just that simple. It sounds like circular logic, but it's not. It's the reality. If you're living in a war-torn country, that is your now, and you have to embrace that. And how you respond to that war-torn country and the challenges in front of you is going to be very different than somebody living in a quiet, peaceful community in the middle of Canada. But in both situations, it still comes from being whole, allowing yourself to be with what is and embracing the current present moment. Some of you will abandon comfort because that's not where your flow takes you. And everybody else is like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Why are they doing that? They had it so good, right? Because that's just ego programming, and the ego wants you to be safe and comfortable and feeling pleasure all the time. Which, of course, as I said, is never how it is for a human being. Others of you, you may move towards comfort at some point, but, life is constantly changing. So there'll be comfortable times, there'll be uncomfortable times. We have to embrace them both. If we start creating new walls again, one, we know the ego's there, and then we start to build up pain and issues again. And all the hard work that many of you have done to go inside and to release these issues and to come into greater wholeness will start to be erased. And that's why we have to go deep. That's why we have to investigate every aspect of ourselves and let it all be given to God. Surrender it all. Nothing can be left behind, because if you leave one little root, it's going to start to grow back up, create new games. So on that note, I see there's one question waiting for me. If people have other questions, this is a great time to type it down in chat pod. Please keep it brief and directed to me. It's a small area, and so I don't want to miss anybody's things that they have to say. As always, I respond intuitively. So if I don't respond, it's really not personal, because just like I've been talking about today, this awakened space inside moves me. And so if it's something that I'm ready to share or I need to share, then I'll share it. But if it's something you still need to figure out on your own, then I won't answer anything in particular, or I won't say anything at all. So these are just other things to appreciate, that these deeper flows guide us even here, even now, and something that I'm hoping that I'm modeling for you as I'm engaging tonight. So from Allison, it says, any advice on letting go of wanting to have a plan for my future? Right now, I have no clue what is happening to me, what I want for my future, and it's so scary to my ego. Well, I think we first have to let go of the idea of a future. Doesn't mean we let go of the ability to plan, but the whole idea of the future really is about safety, right? The ego self wants to be sure that you're going to be safe in the future, but you won't be. There'll be times when you won't be safe, and there'll be times that you will. And that's part of the unity of life, is that embraces all of it. So you go inwards. You sit with yourself, and you really start to spend time, Allison, learning how to listen to yourself, to notice what feels true. When you can feel what's calling to you inside, which often will not be what your ego wants to hear, then you have to follow it. Plan based off of that, right? That's where we bring the mind back in after we've allowed the deeper intelligence inside to speak, because then it just makes it that much easier to move forward. And you're not fighting yourself. Sure, the ego self will be kind of trying to fight you, but there's a quality of strength and energy whenever we act from a place inside that is true to us. And that is the best place to plan from. It's not from just thinking about it and operating off of what you've been told to think is a good idea. Thanks for your question. I hope that's helpful. And I think, on the comment of planning and using our minds, none of our faculties are lost when we integrate and awakening. At times, we get fuzzy-headed, sure, right, as we're healing and changing and growing, whatever. But what I have found is the more we rest in this unity, the more all of our faculties are opened, are enhanced for us. Our talents come forth. Things that we didn't know we could do, we can do. And the things that we need to practice in our human self, whatever the talent may be, we practice and we get better at. So it's very, very intelligent what goes on inside us. It's in no way kind of mystical and full of wishful thinking about things. What other questions do people have? Clearly, I can set things up and I can still talk and interact, right? I haven't lost my ability to do those things. It's really about gaining the flexibility to be anybody and to enjoy the full range of your talents and your abilities. It's our ability to appreciate our limitations on the human side. It's this interesting paradox of feeling that space of limitlessness, the truth of our unlimited connection, and then appreciating the limitations that the human self that we have has. It's like we're all gonna get old if we're fortunate enough to continue living, and our bodies break down, right? And those are certain limitations that we're going to have. And so this is one of the paradoxes. There's many of those that you start to get used to as you simply allow yourself to be in the awakened space. I think another aspect is just appreciating that integrating and awakening is not a doing, really. It's an allowing. The actions that we've taken from us for lives have been, as I said, the disintegrating forces. So when we stop doing those actions, we just naturally move towards wholeness. And this is a really good thing, I think. It would really stink if we had to work hard at being whole. We actually don't. Sometimes people confuse the feelings of wholeness with wholeness, but this truth of unity, of wholeness, oneness, love, it's not a feeling. And I think that's an important point to really, really remember, because usually when people talk about love as well, right, that's another feeling thing where we think we're just going to feel good all the time. When anybody starts talking about the bliss state, and I usually separate the bliss state from presence in the sense that yeah, there are those moments of opening where there's this quality of euphoria that we call bliss. But that doesn't last. Sometimes when other people are talking about bliss, they're referring to it more in the space of oneness, that sort of bliss. But that's not a feeling, if that's what we're talking about. That's simply the quality of pure acceptance of what is. Hi, Natasha. I am finding myself taking on a new ego, a healthier one and a less fearful one, but one that is still excited about being her. I find disappointment, I go back and act from the old ego. Well, I can only encourage you to let go of that new ego too, right? You're welcome, Allison. Because at this point in your journey, Natasha, since we've worked together for a while, I know this is not the time for a new ego. This is the time to go deeper, because the old one is just going to look for a way to put on a new mask, a new dress, new wallpaper for the prison cell. And so continuing to dive deeply inside to see these places that are trying to create new judgments, you really realize that the old judgments, they're just getting a different look, right? This is the right and wrong issue is a great one to pick on, or the I'm safe, not safe issue. Those just are looking for a new expression and say, okay, now I've got a bunch of spiritual things that I'm supposed to do to live life and feel good about myself. And we have to turn the attention back to them and say, what are you doing? What's going on? Because it leads to, once again, more rejections of you. It means that, some of the time you're going to succeed at these rules and some of the times you're not. And so true success is to let go of those rules entirely. There is nothing salvageable in the unconscious ego. Doesn't mean, as I said, that we can't think. We can. It's not actually that big of a deal. The unconscious ego will threaten you with this sort of a thing. We'll say, oh, you're not going to be able to think. You're going to lose your mind. You're going to go crazy. That's another one of the things that people bring up to me. It's like, no, you don't go crazy. You're going sane. But the more you go towards the ego, the more it's going to scream at you. And that's part of understanding the depth of craziness that's inside us. It will try to defend so many different things. It will defend crappy relationships, marginally okay relationships, good relationships that just no longer serve you. It's just there's so many different rules that it's going to throw at you to try and keep you in the game, keep you playing by the rules. So you just learn, Natasha, to just let go of the excitement about being anybody, right? That's the beauty of talking about being a nobody. Like, nobody's excited about that. And that's kind of a double entendre there, right? Nobody's excited about that. Because everybody thinks they need to be a somebody as a means of some sort of survival or safety or whatnot. And that those needs for safety and survival, those are the issues that you really have to continue to drive on, because that's really the roots of the ego. Thanks for the question, Natasha. Let me know if that was helpful. I know a lot of people's egos would be so happy if I gave you a bunch of new rules tonight, right? I'd just be like, yes, all right, now I know what to do, right? And then you can play out a new game. But I can't do that because that's not truthful. Instead, I will point you to the truth that you already are as you are. You need nothing more. We can certainly learn new skill sets, right? But that's different. That's not about being an ego. That's just about something that's curious to you or maybe is useful to you in terms of practical survival, like having enough food to eat, right? That's certainly a useful thing to be able to have. From Natasha, the video cut out apparently. Oh, sorry about that. You can change the speeds on it too, Natasha. So if it's going too fast on your end, if you hover over your computer screen, there's an option under a little gear with HD on it that you can slow it down to a lower frame rate. So it might not cut out. But really, the main point, Natasha, is to just keep letting go. So I have a question from LP. It says, I've read your post on spiritual fatigue during awakening, but at times I'm still having trouble balancing how open I am and being out in public. Can you speak more about this? Absolutely. A lot of us become more sensitive as we go through awakening. And all that's happening is returning to our natural state. So as we return to our natural state, some of us find out we're actually very sensitive to life. And I think most human beings really are. So I describe this as like somebody cranks up the volume in my headphones, whenever I've dropped an issue, right? And that issue is a way that we're kind of buffered from the feelings and energies of life. And then everything gets louder in my head. And so I feel enormously sensitive to all these different things. I've just learned not to freak out about it. You just breathe into it and you be with it. If anything gets particularly upset and feels particularly unsafe inside you, then the encouragement is to go towards that upset inside of you. Because anything that's going on emotionally or energetically inside of you, that's yours. And we don't blame other people for their emotional states and how we feel. Right? That's one of the signs of immaturity on the spiritual path, is when we're still busy blaming other people. It's certainly okay to spend time on your own. Right? There are certain times when we're going deep into our inner process that we just need to be with ourselves. We don't need to be feeling all these other feelings. We've got enough of our own feelings and sensitivities to work through and to heal and to process. So that's very normal. There's nothing particularly wrong about that. The biggest thing really is to use those sensitivities to help you go more inwards and to do your inner work. And during those times when you're super sensitive, take time to yourself, but don't become a recluse as a means of avoiding the difficult emotions that other people have. And that's just cutting yourself off from the whole again, right? That's disintegrative, taking yourself cutting yourself back into smaller pieces. And this path is about embracing all of life. And as I said, that means embracing discomfort. So I hope that's helpful. From Sean, at some point, though, in the process, don't you want to constantly build habits that are healthier and supportive of a healthy ego? No, because you don't really need to think that hard about it. You may do that from that space of awakened awareness. All right, so this is going to sound contradictory, but it really is all about the how. We can do two different things, but they can come from very different places. And that means different things are reinforced inside us, and our influence and our energy we send out to the world is different. So we can walk our dog from a space of fear because we think we have to, or the dog's not getting enough exercise, or we can do it from a space of love and, go out and fully enjoy it. And it changes the quality of our interaction with the dog, with life. This is just kind of the example that comes up into my mind. As I said, like, the ego is like clothes, so that, if something grows up, you put it on, but you have the opportunity to take it off. Most of the time when people start to consciously want to build habits and things that are healthier and supportive, that's still coming from ego fears about living life safely, being afraid of, doing something wrong and hurting yourself or having experiences you don't like. And so all I can say, you have to continue to drive inwards towards those spaces inside that are trying to control your human experience. They're trying to make it safe or look a certain way. And a lot of times, what our old ego selves think is safe is wrong. And it will cut us off from situations that we need in our life, whether we need that difficulty, or it just cuts us off from pleasure because of the nature of how we think. So if a healthy conscious ego grows up as we are melting away, that's fine. But there's nothing to hold on to. And as I said, it's like a shirt. You can take it off. If you find yourself clinging on to this new identity, then that's not truly a conscious and healthy ego. It's just another veil for the old unconscious one that doesn't want to go away. Thanks for the question. I hope that's helpful. You're welcome, LP. What else is on people's minds tonight in our last 10 minutes or so together? I think I really want to emphasize that this is not as hard as we make it out to be. What's hard is just how we treat ourselves, how hard we are on ourselves, and how much we are willing to believe in lies. Right? And of course, when we have so many different things that are lying to us constantly from our friends, relatives, media sources, right? It really reinforces all these other beliefs. And so I'm very glad that so many of you, have come out tonight, because this is a way where we can start to reinforce reality as opposed to illusions, and start to understand that this is not that difficult. Spiritual path is not a difficult thing, but we have a lot of difficulty inside us, and we're really been taught to hold on to a lot of beliefs that aren't healthy. Hi Zoe, do you have any advice for powering through arising pains? I find myself experience past anxieties and I don't think rationally when this happens. I don't know that we power through them, we relax into it. It is difficult for me in the moment to accept the anxious feelings. Of course, that's why it's important to accept them. Right? And that's really where a deeper kind of resilience that grows up in our humanity comes from. The more we see that we can be with really nasty feelings and know that they come from ourselves, the more we can move through them. There's such a strange way where we're afraid of our own emotions. We don't believe we can handle them. And so that's why we cut ourselves off from ourselves, or we're trying to keep all these anxious feelings, in this example, to the side and pushed away from us. But instead what we do is just say, okay, I'm going to bring this to me. I'm going to say, come, everybody come. Like Rumi says this in some of his poetry, right? You open the door, say, everybody's coming, because they're here already. And cutting them off, as I said, cuts us off from our own energy. It creates these walls. And so we've got the energy of the anxiety and the energy of the wall. And this is exhausting. This is one of the reasons I think a lot of people experience the fatigue that was mentioned earlier in the comments. We've just got so much energy caught up resisting other parts of our energies. And so this inner war is forever exhausting. And so we have to surrender. There's a blog post that I've written called What is Surrender? So I encourage you to go search on my blog for that, Zoe. But there's a real strength that we have to develop in our willingness to feel uncomfortable. And the more you can just breathe in and relax and do not believe in them, right? All you have to do is believe that you're feeling anxious, because you are. So that doesn't actually require belief. But don't believe that there's a reason for them exactly, that you don't need to justify them, you don't need to keep them. You just breathe into them and you keep relaxing, breathing and relaxing, breathing and relaxing. And eventually, they break down. They're only going to stay around if you start to believe you should be scared about something. And your ego, and this is the challenge, your ego is probably going to look for a reason to justify them. It's going to start running around saying, I should be scared because of finances, of relationships, of children, of parents, of what, right? It'll find something. And if you do that, then that's kind of like plugging a fan back into a wall. It's going to keep it spinning. Thanks for your question, Zoe. I hope that helps. Hi, Allison. I've noticed that I am trying to earn God's love by being a good person. I've been trying to go into the pain of it, but the feeling persists. Yeah, that's an unfortunate belief system that's really been propagated in Western culture. It's not true. You don't have to do anything to earn God's love. You have to do things occasionally to earn parents' love because they want you to and because of their belief system. That's also not, a healthy thing to do. I think the main thing is, you just go back to that sort of dissolving and watching and witnessing these experiences come up and these beliefs come up, and doing your best to just really not give them any energy past just noticing, oh, here's this idea thinking I need to be a good person. The awakened space really is beyond good and evil. Right? It doesn't need those labels. And as I said, typically the more we rest in that space, 95% of the time, we act from a space of kindness. So we are a good person, but it's not through trying. And there are deeper kindnesses that arise that don't look like good things to do to other people. And that's kind of why I was giving that metaphor of offering slaps, right? It's like, I don't think I've ever slapped anybody in my life, but I offer that appreciation that, I have that space within me that I could, if that felt right and true. And who knows, that may be the exact right time somebody needs to snap out of something. But it wouldn't be coming from a place of wanting to hurt somebody, as I mentioned before. So in that way, it won't look like a good thing. There's a great Rumi poem. It's Jesus on a lean donkey. That's the name of the poem. And I don't even think Jesus has mentioned it. Rumi's talking about Muhammad. And from the guy's perspective of what's going on, this guy in the poem and Muhammad who comes and finds him, it just seems crazy what Muhammad does to him, because Muhammad comes and the first thing this guy, he's been sleeping and wakes up and Muhammad's like beating him with a stick, and then he's like forcing him to eat rotten apples, and then he's chasing him around and beating him with a stick some more, and he just keeps up, and it's like, does this sound like a good thing? No, it sounds like that Muhammad's being a terrible person. But as the story goes on, finally the man is just exhausted. He's bleeding and he throws up all the rotten apples, and he throws up this poisonous snake, which is what Muhammad had seen climb into this person while he was sleeping. And Muhammad says, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what had happened, but if I had, you would have frozen. You wouldn't have been able to have done anything. You'd have panicked so much. And this is the only way that was present in that current moment that I could help you. So this is another way to understand how this spirit inside us can move in ways that's not going to make sense to everyday society. Now, I'm not encouraging anybody to go beat people with sticks into spiritual awakening or anything. I just encourage you to go towards the pain in yourself, to go towards those hidden snakes inside of yourself so that you learn how to pull them out. And when you do that, you tend to rest more deeply in awareness, in actions, in thoughts, in planning, and all of that just becomes more natural. And it just kind of does itself on its own, and it comes from a place of deeper ease. Hi, Zoe. Thank you for your words. I'll check out the blog you recommended. You're welcome. I'm glad to help. How about one more question, and I think we'll be good for tonight. And if anybody hasn't asked and wants to ask a question, this is a great time to do it. And of course, I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com, so that's also where you can email me. And if anybody would like to donate to me to help support me, you can go to spiritualawakeningprocess.com. There's a donate button on the right-hand side. These are free, but I am happy to receive donations because that's how this work is supported. That's why I'm here. I'm here because many of you have diligently supported me now for years, and I'm very grateful for that support. So one of the ways that I often talk about money is energy, and where your energy goes is what you create in the world. And so anytime you walk out into the cities and towns that you live in, just notice all the different things around you and understand that that was created by the energy of money. And there won't be tall buildings there if people didn't think it were important and funnel tons of energy that way. And the same goes with spiritual teachers, myself and others included. And I encourage you to donate to other spiritual teachers and healers as well, because that's how we're going to keep them around. And if you don't do that, if the energy isn't there, they have to go do other things. So just some food for thought on that. Well, it seems like everybody's good then. I hope this was useful. Spiritual talk, the next one will be in 2 weeks. I haven't decided on the topic. You're welcome to make suggestions. But that one will be back at 10:30 a.m. because I do that for my friends in Europe. Oh, it looks like there's a question from Kyle. Sometimes I find myself mustering up the courage to face external fears in the world, and I find that when I do, my ego steps in and somehow distorts the facing of the fear. Well, my friend, that's why you have to face the internal fears, because the external world will have plenty of fears, plenty of ways to trigger you, and so you'll be constantly be triggered all the time. There's no end to the different ways that the external world can trigger you. That's why you have to go towards the bomb. And the bomb is the fear inside you, because when you resolve that issue, the world can't trigger it anymore, and that fear goes away. So thanks for all of you sharing space with me tonight. Have a beautiful night or evening wherever you may be, and I look forward to having you again. Have a great night. Bye.